This is like 2 out of 3 times we've had some video issues with Bob. Bob is a mysterious man. Doesn't want to see doesn't want us to see what he's doing.
Well, it's
that's because I have a face for radio. You know,
come on.
There.
You have a face for everything, my friend. It's the color commentator for the Oilers radio broadcast and also the host of my favorite show, Oilers Now. I listen every night on Shed. It's Bob Stauffer. Hi, friend.
You know, DJ, that little snippet you put together 25 years from now as you're going to be closing out your career, you're going to do the Jim Carrey speech from the Golden Globes, and it's going to say something to the effect of, you know, based on my early work, it's hard to believe that I got to this place. So that was really funny. You ever see that with Jim Carrey? You know, if you had taken a look at my early body of work during my career, no one would have thought this would have been possible. And it just... You know, you got to have fun. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about sports. We work in the toy department of life. Even you are allowed to get riled up at times, and I have a feeling I'm going to bring up a couple pretty interesting points here with what occurred with the offer sheet, and maybe why Oilers fans at times are sort of like, "Come on, man." But the reality is, you still got to enjoy it. We work in a great line of work, and have the privilege to, cover the great players we do.
Yeah, I love the Jim Carrey stand-up where he's just like, look, I'm a dog. And he just like splashes his water bottle in his face and it's just like, and you're like, kind of looks like funny. A dog. Shout out Jim Carrey. Great Canadian, by the way. Not a lot of people know that.
You don't think they don't know that he's Canadian? We know he's Canadian here. I don't know if they all take, credit. It's funny. It's like you don't become a star in Canada until you reach the height of popularity of the United States. Other than the Tragically Hip, they were a distinctly Canadian band that never really crossed over the way, say, Nickelback did. But the majority of the Canadians sort of the more highbrow Canadians would say that, Nickelback flat out sucks, and the Tragically Hip were, one of the greatest Canadian bands of all time. I actually had the privilege. Gord Downie was on our plane one time. He worked on Waterkeepers with Kevin Lowe, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was on Waterkeepers as well. And so he flew with us to Calgary for a preseason game. And I ended up talking to him about all things tree planting, and he had a connection to tree planting through a relative of his. And I said, Canadians we have kids from all over Canada doing this job. Kids from Quebec have a completely different way of looking at Canada than maybe somebody does from Alberta. I'm out in the West Coast right now, and people out here see things maybe differently than people in Alberta and Saskatchewan. But the one thing we could all agree on is everybody loved the Tragically Hip. And that is, but they never really, I think they did Saturday Night Live back in like 94, but they never really gained great popularity in the US. So there's the one illustration of somebody that was super cool in Canada that didn't really make it in the States, and it didn't matter. They still love them.
Every Canadian that's made it in the United States, we all know that they're Canadian because Canadians don't shut the fuck up about it. It's always
you're
like,
right.
Hey, do you know that person's Canadian? They're Canadian. They're Canadian. We're like, we fucking get it. We know.
There you go. What do you want me to respond to that? We have a term in Canada. It's called FA, and it's not for free agents. You can figure out what that term is.
Fair.
We adhere to CanCon, though. I recently learned about that, or I guess I learned about it during the season, and I love the rule that you guys have up there, where a certain percentage of media has to be Canadian. Our entire show is just Oilers the whole time, so I guess
crazy.
We don't do US Con, but I'd rather do CanCon than US Con. Do me a favor, announce the Leon Draisaitl signing, because I'm a little blue over here.
I can't do that yet. You heard what Stan Bowman said yesterday. They're working on it. They've had discussions. I mean, it's been a pretty. It's funny with offer sheets because the infamous comeback from Kevin Lowe directed Brian Burke's way. Like, do you know how many offer sheets there have been total, you guys, over the years?
Oh, yeah, very few.
44 offer sheets dating back to, I guess, it would have to have been the late 80s, okay? 44 offer sheets. Oiler players have been targeted 8 times. Now, the first 6 was when Edmonton was a small market Canadian franchise. Peter Pocklington was the owner the entire time that the Oilers had those offers. So, like Shane Corson was offer sheeted by the St. Louis Blues, and the Oilers didn't match. And Adam Graves was offer sheeted and didn't get matched. I mean, those were big losses. Now the Oilers ended up brokering a deal in the Joseph one that brought him, or in the Shane Corson one that brought him back. Ironically enough, Curtis Joseph and I believe at the time Mike Greer, who's now of course the GM of the San Jose Sharks. But 8 of the 44 offer sheets have been directed against Edmonton players, and a lot of times back in the 80s and through the mid 90s. Oilers fans kind of felt like, hey, we're being picked on. We're a small market franchise. Well, then we get to a salary cap in 04-05, which Gary Bettman, I've often said it was the battle for Alberta, for teams like Edmonton and Calgary and Ottawa. Used to be a thing called the Canadian Assistance Program for 3 years, from 2001 to 2004, that gave the 3 Canadian teams, Edmonton, Calgary, and Ottawa, $3 million each. And not all the partners in the league were super stoked to be paying it, by the way, as Cal Nichols has relayed to me over the years. He was then the chairman of the Edmonton Investors Group. We came out of that, had a cap. Oilers went to the final in 06. In the summer of 07, Edmonton back-to-back in a span of a week, first offer sheeted Thomas Vanek and then Dustin Penner. And Vanek was with Buffalo, and Darcy Regier, was not happy and spoke about it right away, and Buffalo matched. And then there was this, Brian Burke took some significant shots at the Oilers and Kevin Lowe at the time after they offered to Dustin Penner. Kevin's response was on my old show before I was doing the Oilers broadcast, and I had to chuckle. I mean, just listening. They ended up patching up the relationship, but it was heated there for a while. So the two times Edmonton's made an offer sheet, the American general managers of those teams at the time, again, Darcy Regier and Brian Burke, I'm not saying anything that's wrong here. It's public record. They went off on the Oilers for going down that path. And Stan Bowman was quite matter of fact with the Blues offer sheets that came through a week ago, on the Tuesday morning. And that puts Edmonton as the team that's had 8 offer sheets against them historically all time.
Well, did they see this coming? I know that there's been a lot of talk with which I disagree, that you should have left space for your own guys. And Doug Armstrong talked about that, hey, this is a unique position because if we were to offer sheet, say somebody on Detroit, there's a better chance they can match. We knew that if we overpaid for these guys, they wouldn't be able to match. You could make the argument, well, then don't sign Jeff Skinner, don't sign Victor Arvidsson, don't bring back Adam Henrique. I make a face at that. Did the Oilers, as they were doing all their stuff, specifically Jeff Jackson, see that this was very much at risk of happening?
I'll do a side note. I do find it interesting as I sat and watched the Hlinka Gretzky at Edmonton 2 weeks ago. The Team Canada brass for both the Four Nations Cup and the upcoming Olympics were in town. Majority of the NHL GMs that were there to watch. These are all kids that are going to get drafted in 2025. And I talked to 3 of the members of Team Canada, and they were in the same suite together. Okay? Doug was there. So was Jim Nill. Now, I broadcast Thomas Harley's father's games, Brian Harley at the University of Alberta. Thomas Harley had a 15-goal, 47-point season this year. He's a left shot. Philip Broberg played 12 games in the NHL. I found it interesting that, and maybe Doug did reach out to Andy Scott, the agent for Thomas Harley, but I found it interesting. Like last year, nobody offer sheeted Evan Bouchard. He had back-to-back 40-point seasons in the NHL. He got 2 years at $3.9 million. If I was to look at a guy who could step in right away and immediately improve the St. Louis defense, for me, the answer would be Thomas Harley, right? He's a rising star, 15-goal, 47-point season. Broberg played 12 games in the regular season. So, I did find that a little bit interesting who did get targeted. I'm sure Doug can rationalize and bring it from a Blues perspective. And he talked about the fact yesterday that he had offered sheet his mother if need be. Okay. Now, should Edmonton have been better prepared? I don't know what you heard on the show, but I can 100% guarantee you that the conversation occurred about getting ahead, especially after December the 5th, when Kevin Weeks reported that Darren Ferris had requested a trade for Philip Broberg. The Oilers played Carolina the next morning and pounded the Hurricanes That was a game where Rod Brindamore went on the bench, and we're going to lose. I don't know. I think 20-0 if we don't get control of this game here. I think Edmonton won 6-0 or 6-1. But I digress. I mean, it was should the Oilers have been ahead. I believe I can 100% guarantee you that somebody in the organization took it forward to Ken Holland, who drafted Broberg 5 years ago, and discuss Broberg and Holloway and getting ahead on those two. I can 100% guarantee you that somebody with the club did that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to like what the big hang up was if they did want to sign those guys, why it came all the way to this point, and if they ever considered matching. Because, I mean, they had the week, and then they were busy during the week finding, replacements. They obviously had the trades and stuff. But did they ever explore, in your opinion, from your side, like, were they looking to match what St. Louis offered?
Oh, I think, Pete, they took the full week to go through the process. Like, absolutely. Nice hat, by the way. Chris McFarland, real good guy, solid GM.
You know it.
Very understated, like his style. Anyhow, yeah. I mean, I think it came as a surprise that there was, by the way, this is the first time there's ever been a double offer sheet.
Mm-hmm.
I love
one organization going after another organization. So I'm pretty sure, one of the things that would have occurred here, again, there was a change in the management, right? Like Ken Holland, 5 years, second best record in the Western Conference during those 5 seasons, took over a 25th place team. Oilers played the second most amount of playoff games the last 3 years in the NHL. Like he did some good things, hit the home run on the Ekholm trade, signed Hyman, great contract. The Campbell deal he'd probably like to have back, the Athanasiou trade. Hits and misses along the ways, but the Oilers now, as a result of this, do not have a single first-round pick left from the Ken Holland, Tyler Wright regime as GM and head amateur scout, right, over the last 5-year window. So back to what did they discuss? I'm sure the Oilers looked at it from every possible perspective. Stan Bowman comes in. I don't 100%. If I'm Stan, I would have called Darren Ferris, because we know there was a breakdown. If Darren Ferris is leaking the word out that he's looking for a trade in December of 2023, obviously at some point here, the agency's feeling that Broberg had not been maximized in Edmonton. And frankly, I understand that feeling. I don't think the Oilers necessarily even put Evan Bouchard in the position to succeed early. Jim Playfair and Dave Tippett played Caleb Jones and Ethan Bear ahead of Evan Bouchard. Think about that right now.
Well, I would argue that like the Oilers don't put any defenseman in a position to succeed before this past season.
Yeah, before Knoblauch.
Yeah.
Well, but Bouchard is the third highest scoring player in the NHL in the playoffs the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Edmonton, at one time, Dave Tippett and Jim Playfair were playing two guys that are not even considered, staples of top 6 defenses in the league right now, ahead of them. And then in Broberg's case, when Jay and Manson came up from the minors, they had a real affinity for Vincent Desharnais. And it was partially the role where Desharnais was slotted, but they played Desharnais ahead of Broberg. We went into Nashville, third game of the year, the Oilers did, beat the Preds 6-1. Broberg was terrific in that game. And Edmonton was a little lucky to win 6-1. Like, Nashville didn't play terribly. The puck just went in the net for the Oilers that night. McDavid made an unreal play for a goal. But Broberg played really well and came out of the lineup in the fourth game of the year against Philly. So I understand a little bit of the exasperation along the way, especially with Broberg. And, so do I think Stan Bowman exhausted? Yes, I do. I think he took looked at a lot of different ways. I think my guess is he talked to Darren Ferris, who represented Broberg for sure, to see where the head space was at with the player as well. The irony of this, guys, is you watch the Stanley Cup final. That's an interesting call. Anyways, you watch the Stanley Cup final. Philip Broberg, if the Oilers had been eliminated by the Vancouver Canucks in round 2, this offer sheet doesn't happen.
Oh, yeah, we wouldn't know about him.
Right. And instead, he gets in game 4 against Dallas. Paul Coffey of all the guys that would know how to get through to a young puck-moving, skilled defenseman that could skate, it's Paul Coffey. Because believe it or not, Paul Coffey was healthy scratched in his rookie year in the NHL until Glenn say they ended up firing Bugsy Watson and ensuring that Paul Coffey and Yari Curry were going to play. So Coffey empowered Broberg. He didn't sweat the mistakes that happened on the ice, and Broberg got in the final 10 games of the playoff run for the Oilers, and they ended up going 6-4 during those games.
Overall, how big of a loss do you think this is to the Oilers, like for next season? And like what's St. Louis getting in these two guys?
Well, we'll start with what St. Louis is getting. I think that Broberg all day is a top 4 defenseman in the future and potentially a top 3. He needs to hit back when he gets hit. You can't. First game of the year this year, Pettersson in Vancouver just destroyed him. You got to go right back at a guy when he does that to you. And that's, I saw him down in Bakersfield in between game 3 and game 4 of the LA Oilers series. And you could see the maturation that was in Broberg's game. So I do think he's a legitimate top 4 defenseman right now. I think he is. And if I'm Darren Ferris, I want him on the left side. He wasn't going to play on the left side at Edmonton. He was going to play on the right side. I think optimally, if he puts it all together, he can become a number 3 D-man. And I'm going to give you a blast from the past. I think he reminds me a little bit better skating version of a guy named Kenny Johnson. He used to play with the Islanders, played about 600 games in the NHL. Holloway overcame, a difficult family matter in the last few years. His family was close to him. They live in Fort Bragg, just outside of Calgary. So his family was up. We saw them a lot during the regular season and playoffs. And unfortunately, they're not going to get quite that same opportunity with Dylan being in St. Louis. I think Dylan, at minimum, is, if you slot your team as top 6 forwards and then the third line center is your number 7 forward, he is at minimum a number 8 forward on a team and potentially could be a 5, like a second line. He's a middle 6 forward. He can skate. And the question is, he certainly isn't afraid to be physical. He's got courage. So they're both, like, St. Louis is getting 2 pretty good players here. That said, they combined DJ for 6 goals last year for the Oilers. Edmonton had a pretty good team without him, and they're going to have a pretty good team this year with him. I just personally would have preferred to have seen them stay in Edmonton because the Oilers spent a lot of time, even though in stretches it wasn't idyllic in terms of the development process with the players. They did invest, 9 combined years between the two of them.
Let's say they had matched specifically on Broberg. Pete and I have discussed that we discourage fans from knocking a player for taking a contract that they're offered. However, in my experience, I have noticed that players are maybe a little off the record. Players are maybe a little more willing to look at another guy's contract and say, like, wow, he's making that. How would Broberg, a player who was on the record of wanting out of Edmonton, been received if he had returned to that room, given the impassioned, we saw the Zach Hyman thing of I want everybody to come back, given that Adam Henrique comes for less, that Jeff Skinner comes for less, in a cup or bust season, how would that have kind of fit in and how would he have been welcomed back?
Well, your Evan Bouchard's being paid $3.9 million coming off of an 80-point season. Philip Broberg played 12 games last year. If the Oilers had matched, they would have been making $4.58 million. Generally speaking, my experience, I can't, I lacked the speed, talent, agility, coordination, toughness, character, and discipline to play in the Western League, let alone the NHL. But my experience is players would say good for another guy getting a contract, but there's a caveat here. The Oilers have an entire line of players that got offered more elsewhere that all returned. Janmark, Henrique, and Brown all got offered above the rate that they got paid to play in Edmonton to be a part of things. Do I think Skinner could have got more, Jeff Skinner? 100%. And so, that's a great question, and I think it's a very fair perspective to have. And I think it's not lost on the players that they are. I mean, come on. They're still a favorite, even losing these 2 guys. And then getting Podkolzin and Emerson, relative, like Emerson played more games in the NHL last year than Broberg did and played a more significant role when he played in San Jose. Broberg played a bunch of games where Edmonton dressed 7 defensemen. So fair question. And I do think that you have to think about that in the back of your mind when you're assessing a decision as to whether or not you're going to match or not.
Yeah, the Emerson thing is interesting because, like, CC was, he has a spot in our hearts,
That's our
but
guy.
he was kind of
Careful,
a
Pete.
chaos god in Edmonton. How much do you feel for Cody CC going to San Jose based off the position that he was in and kind of surviving the first round of trade rumors? And ultimately, do you think that the swap CC and Broberg for Emerson is a net positive for the Oilers?
I think it's too early to say what it is net wise,
Yeah.
Pete. Well, let's start with CC. He's been a plus player 5 straight years. The year of the Leafs, the year of Pittsburgh, 3 straight years at Edmonton. He was a plus player. Kept his head above water. Historically speaking, Edmund, like you got, I don't know, Pete, if you've been out to Western Canada. Obviously, DJ came out during the final. They tend to like more physical defensemen. Sometimes puck, it's like in basketball, the term European big man. Sometimes in hockey, right shot. I think back to when the Oilers had Jeff Petrie and Justin Schultz here, and they led the team in ice time, and neither guy was overly physical, but both guys could get the puck up the ice and could process the game. And I had a lot of time for both players. Dating all the way back to Tom Poti, there was criticism of him, and then Petrie and Schultz, and the Oilers did not get value in the trades based on how their careers continued for both Petrie and Schultz after. I mean, those guys have had real good careers after and been legitimate players on good playoff teams. And I think that there's nuance in Cody Cece's game that not everybody appreciated. So, unfortunately, it's this simple. He was a cap casualty for Edmonton to get under the cap with Evander Kane on the active roster, even if he's on IR, but on the active roster, not on LTIR to start the year. That's now they got Emerson back. Intriguing guy. Played for Chris Knobloch. Had an unbelievable year in Hartford 2 years ago. Knobloch's going to know him well. He can move the puck. Makes a good 5-foot pass. Pretty good skater. And there's some belief that he has a chance to be a subtle addition for Edmonton. To me, Podkolzin's the wilder swing. Just because not sure what he is. Like, we saw him a couple of years ago, 14 goals, 26 points. It appears as though he fell out of favor with Rick Tocchet, Vancouver. All those things happen sometimes. So maybe a second opinion will provide a different opportunity for Vasily Podkolzin. But what it does give the Oilers is cost-controlled players, at least for the next upcoming season in those roles.
Hey, thanks for watching the channel.
We appreciate everybody who checks out our stuff, but 80% of our viewers are not actually subscribed to this page, so if you could smash that subscribe button, it would go a very long way for us.
The more subscriptions we have, the more visibility we get from YouTube, which allows us to do more.
So press that button. Thank you. So do you think that they have another move to make? Obviously, they're going to enter the season with roughly $1 million in cap space anyway, which is good that they can go and not have to LTIR Kane. But do you think something else is coming? Because people have to remember, it's not like, oh, okay, well, now you've got a bunch of picks because you let these guys walk. They didn't have shit for picks. They didn't have a first, second, third, I think even fourth round pick this year. Now they at least have a second and a third and some space. Do you think they do something soon, or is this about, okay,
Well,
they can
I think
go from there?
Obviously, yeah, DJ, obviously, we all know that Leon Draisaitl is a priority, but it would not surprise me if they're having an internal discussion on whether or not they need to add one more potential puck mover, and likely a right shot if they do. I don't know if they're going to act on it or not. Now, in terms of the cap space that gets accrued during the year, all day they might give a couple guys an opportunity out of the gate, see how they do, and then use, like, if Kane can come back by, say, February and he's healthy, because he wasn't healthy last year.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see really what Evander can do. If he, comes back halfway through the year, that'll be a bonus. I mean, when the guy's on his game, he's a legit top 6 player that provides physicality and some edge. So that'll be an addition up front, and then they can use the accrued cap space at the deadline, which would work out to about $4 million to potentially add, I would guess, given that they've got Ekholm, Nurse, and Kulak on the left side, that they would be adding a right shot defenseman. So those would be the two moves that I would see.
I started with Leon. I'll end with Leon. Is do you think that there is any sort of added motivation now for vibe's sake, for PR's sake, to say, okay, let's get this guy done sooner rather than later, and then this offseason starts with getting all these guys, and it ends with we can just go in, focus on a cup or bust season, not having to worry about our second best player.
And was that phone call that you got the news of Leon's
That's
extension?
what I was going to we were asking questions at the same time. I was going to say that wasn't a Yeary on the phone, was it?
That was a father of a NHLer right now that reached out. So that's all I'll say on that.
German NHLer?
What's that?
A German NHLer, Bob?
No, Peter would not call me. Peter Draisaitl. Though, do you know why Leon wears number 29?
No.
So Peter Draisaitl was coaching Ravensburg, and the star player in the team was a guy named Ben Thompson, who played at the University of Alberta and was a line mate of Chris Knobloch. And Ben Thompson spent extra time with Leon after practice, so Leon adopted his number 29. And that is where Leon So how is that for? So here we are all these years later, and Ben Thompson's former line mate is now coaching Leon Draisaitl on the Edmonton Oilers.
Can I ask you just like generally, what does Peter Draisaitl look like? Because currently Leon Draisaitl is the hottest person alive, and famously men get more attractive as they age. Example, Bob Stauffer. Is Peter just a beautiful man?
I did like, I think you guys were there when Mark Spector asked Leon about, Bob Stauffer's the most handsome man in Edmonton. Or something like that. And Leon goes, of course. Peter
I love Leon's love for you. It's like, side note, I love how much, like when he watches that famous clip of you skating, there's more than, oh, this is cool, this is cute. There is love in his eyes.
Well, one day we'll go to Pub 1905 and we'll talk about a conversation that occurred before the draft that year. But all I know is Leon Draisaitl had an unbelievable dinner with the Edmonton Oilers, and one of their executives called me up afterwards and said, "Bob, it was like Leon knew what the questions were before they were even going." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." So, anyways, the Oilers didn't win the lottery once; they won the lottery twice. Mm-hmm. Right? They won and people say, "What are you talking about? They won it a bunch of times." But they won the lottery in 2014 when Draisaitl was still available at 3 for them to take. Peter Draisaitl is a well put together guy. And you can see where Leon doesn't sweat fools. Like, you know what? He sticks up for his teammates, and sometimes that results in a little bit of energy coming back the other way on a question. He's got the pain threshold of a cadaver. Like, he is a tough. Well, I'll ask you guys, where would Leon rank, in your opinion, in playoff performance over the last 3 years?
I mean, he was the best player in the playoffs on 1 foot a few years ago. He absolutely established himself as a fucking dog that year, and it has not gone the other way at all. So he's an absolute dog. I love that guy. I'd take him on my team, like probably in the first handful of guys if I was selecting like all playoff team.
Oh yeah, and Pete and I used to have the argument of who's the second best player in the NHL or who's the third best player in the NHL, because it's just so much more fun than who's the best player in the NHL. And you always have like the McKinnons in the conversation. And I just have such a. We were even talking recently about like for career. Would you take Malkin?
Malkin
like
or
prime Malkin
Draisaitl
versus prime Draisaitl? And I'm like, this makes me such a fucking weenie, but there are so few players ever that I look at and I'm like, that guy's better than Leon Draisaitl.
Yeah, he's a hell of a player, and they do have immense respect. Somebody might have pointed that out to the general manager of Pittsburgh last week. Connor and Leon have immense respect for what Crosby and Malkin have accomplished in their career. And the Oilers have beaten Pittsburgh 6 straight times and outscored them 33-9 in those games. They come to play in the regular season against the Penguins, ironically, who are in Edmonton on Hall of Fame night when we recognize Craig McTavish, who, as you know, does my show, and Randy Gregg. Back to Leon. It's not lost in anybody that's in oil country how valuable Leon is. I'll say this. There is a pathway to get an 8-year extension done. If I'm Andy Scott and Mike Liut from Octagon, given Leon's age, I want that 8-year deal done. and there's only one place where Connor and Leon can play together, and that's Edmonton. So I defer to the Frank Saravalli perspective. You guys know Frank. Frank has said for 2 years in our show, it's better than a 95% chance the Oilers get Leon and Connor done, and I expect that as well.
You know what else Frank says? He'll say, like, fuck you if you mess with him because he's a tough guy. And I didn't say that as like a disparaging tough guy. Like, he's a tough man.
Frank got humbled in Edmonton, though. We swung by one of our haunts that you've been to, and these women were outside vaping, and as you know, kids do these days. And she looks at Frank and myself, and as you know, Frank's the oldest looking guy in his 30s you've ever seen. And she goes, "Oh, are you two guys brothers?" Oh, did I? Because there's like a 20-year difference in range. I had a little bit of fun at Frank's expense on that. So
hell yeah.
And again, like what I love about Frank is like you just don't fuck with anybody, but like don't fuck with Frank. He's Philly. He's tough. And
he's Philly tough.
Talking about people who don't suffer fools, like it's just not fucking worth it for you because he's gonna win that game all day. He's one tough customer. I wish I could have seen that because Frank.
It probably just ruined his night.
Yeah, you're right.
You just gotta laugh when stuff like that happens, man. Like you just gotta. That's the thing. You get when you're young and a little bit cocky, and you get embarrassed, you feel humiliated, and you get to a certain place in your life, and you know you're just happy you're alive. You know, once you think right, you just got to roll with it. That's all there is to it.
I was at a bar in Toronto, and a guy came up to me and was like, "Hey, are you the American Pie guy?" And I was like, "No, sir, I am not." And he was like, "Come on." And I was in like a big group of people, and people were like dressed nice or whatever. I don't know. For whatever reason, this guy deduced like, "Oh, this is for sure Jason Biggs." He came back later, took my beer out of my hand, drank it, and said, "You can buy another one. You're the American Pie guy."
Oh my God,
I was like,
that's ridiculous.
And they say Canadians are polite, but I mean, at least you're getting compared to a handsome looking man, as people can see in the lower third font. The two regulars that I get compared to are Big Pussy from The Sopranos, who, by the way, gets whacked on that show, and Bartolo Colon. So those are
outrageous. Bartolo Colon is one of the most electric home runs in Major League Baseball history, though. So there you go, two legends in my book.
Pete, I might not have been able to hit it, but I would have been able to run around the bases faster than that. That's all I'm going to tell you. So,
hell yes.
Memorable. Didn't he pitch until like his mid-40s or something, Bartolo Colon?
Yeah, oh yeah. He had a secret family. He did steroids, maybe. He's had a real nice life.
Well, what's wrong with having a secret family or two?
Yeah,
nothing by my
One
standards.
of your greatest heroes in American history? Charles Lindbergh. Did he not have a secret family?
People say family is like the biggest reason for being alive. So why not have two families?
There you go. Awesome stuff.
You get a bunch of best days of your life. Like best day of my life, getting married. My child being born. Just do both those things as many, and you'll just have so many good days. You let the cat out of the bag a little bit by mentioning Pub 1905. Now that you've done it, I will say lightly what I told these guys. There's a place in Edmonton, Pub 1905, where people are just hanging around outside and inside because there's rumor that they might be able to catch a glimpse of Bob Stauffer. And I would love for you to try to deny that because that is the fucking God's honest truth. People are just dripping around that place thinking maybe Bob is here somewhere. And like you got hiding spots in there. It is, if you needed any more evidence that Bob runs that town, Pub 1905.
Never doubted it for a second.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but let's just say that people want to get an enhanced experience come playoff time as the playoffs roll in. Everybody gets involved. We had some awesome nights there during the run, and I gotta thank the Oilers web team because they put a video out of us when we were walking on the tarmac in Fort Lauderdale, and I didn't want to do it, but I've always liked Miami Vice, and we went with it. And when you have NHL general managers come up to you and talk to you about that, that's pretty funny stuff, right?
That's the best.
I love that.
They're like, Stauffer, 99% of your tweets are about the Oilers, and you slid that one in there, and it was awesome. You got to have fun with it, guys. I mean, you know that. So just, Anyways, bottom line, it was a tough day in oil country to see, Broberg and Holloway go. It'll force the organization to work and be creative and be better. I have complete confidence under Jeff Jackson and Stan Bowman that they'll have a better draft and development process carrying forward, because I think at times, and the Oilers made some changes in some of the personnel they deployed in some of those management type roles over the last few years, but I thought at times it was a little bit, there wasn't great synchronicity with all the different parts. And I think the best people are collaborative, and the best organizations are collaborative. And I think Edmonton's headed down that path. And unfortunately, in the process, they lost a couple decent young players. And I hope they can reach their potential in St. Louis.
Well, Bob, you're the greatest. We love having you on. We love talking to you. We took up more of your time than probably we needed to, but really we could talk to you all day. Thank you so much for coming on.
We love you.
All right, guys. See you later. Take care.
We all silly like the mayor.